Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for coming to our August Texas Book Chat Live event. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. The restrooms are down the hall on your left, and we'll take questions at the end of the session. So please hold your questions until then. And at the conclusion of the event, the authors are available to sign books if you brought your books with you. So we are so delighted today to welcome two distinguished authors and naturalists to the State Library. Both Lynne and Jim Weber are recently retired from more than 30-year accomplished careers at IBM in Austin. They are certified Texas Master Naturalists, and Lynne is a past president of the Capital Area chapter. The Webers are dedicated naturalists who have been studying Texas natural history since 1989. They have served on the Balcones Canyonlands Preserve Citizens Advisory Council and on the executive boards of the Big Bend Natural History Association, the Big Bend Conservancy, and the Chihuahuan Desert Research Institute. They conduct golden cheek warbler surveys, lead guided hikes, restore native habitats, and are stewards of an 8-acre preserve that is part of the Balcones Canyonland Preserve. Their nature photography and writing appears in their monthly blog, as well as in several periodical publications and newsletters. They are the authors of several books, including Nature Watch Austin, Nature Watch Big Bend, and most recently, the book we are here to discuss today, Naturalist Austin. Please join me in welcoming the Webers. Oh, and I'm Michelle Chon-Santos at the Texas Center for the Book. I should have said that at the beginning. Anyway, so what inspired you to write Naturalist Austin, a guide to the plants and animals of Central Texas?
Do you want to start, or I'll start? Well, we like all of, we have enjoyed these book projects since we stopped working for a paycheck. And this ended up being a COVID project for us initially, because we were looking for something to amuse ourselves with while we were kind of holed up in town, and this was something that was very easy to work on by ourselves and around town without too much interaction. So we've always liked the amount of biodiversity in Central Texas, and Austin in particular, and there's a lot of unique species, underappreciated species, and we thought it would be nice to try to accumulate one book with a summary of most of the plants and animals that you're most likely to see, and some of the unique things.
Sure. Can you hear me? I think that this, by the way, is our 5th book.
Oh, okay.
And all of them have been nature books. And how we got started in it was we started writing articles for a neighborhood newsletter. We live in Jester Stage, which is near 2222 and 360. And our neighborhood is surrounded by, on 3 sides, by preserve. And people were seeing things not knowing what they were, and we thought it was really important to get the word out. So in 2008, we actually started writing articles for our neighborhood newsletter. We call them Nature Watch. And every month we put something out. Now we're doing it on our blog. It goes to several neighborhood newsletters, and that actually turned into our first book.
Oh, okay. So yeah, this is a little bit my second question. So I'm fascinated that you had 30+ year careers at IBM, and then you transitioned into the second career as master naturalist and authors. So was writing together always something you had planned to do in retirement? We talked a little bit before it started about how you didn't want to go from being super busy to not busy at all. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
The articles actually, aside from us trying to educate people about what's around us, that idea actually came from the Master Naturalist program, which we completed in 2007. And one of the things there that you can get credit for in terms of volunteerism is educating the public about nature.
Oh, okay.
So actually, if you look at it, I do most of the writing, and Jim does most of the photography.
Oh, okay.
Although all the good photographs are mine. But
After my post-processing.
But after his post-processing. But we end up collaborating on things, picking topics, and really wanting to try and get people to appreciate the little things. and understand kind of what's going on in their yard.
Yeah, it's not all deer and bears and things, big animal kind of things. It's all the little creatures and the insects and the little lizards and mammals and things that people tend to overlook, but really make our world an interesting place.
And Michelle, to directly answer your question, we realized, as we were working and we were really busy, we put some time into, about 10 years before we retired, we put some time into thinking, what do we want to do when all this mayhem stops? Because we were on 15, 20 conference calls a day and call outs, and we just wanted something more soothing to do, but yet we can still learn and contribute. So we did do the Master Naturalist program, we started writing the books, and we actually, I think, got, was it 2 or 3 of the books out before we actually retired.
Oh, okay. So I love that you transitioned into it and had such an intentional plan. I think that's super smart. So describe the process of creating a guide like this one. So how do you figure out what to include and what to leave out? How long is the process from when you began to write and photograph and then when the book is published?
Well, we started out, we knew we wanted to cover the most common plants and animals that you would find in Central Texas. And we decided, much to our, and maybe our distaste, we would include some non-native things too that you see out in the preserves and stuff that need to get pulled. But we decided that then we would break it down into different groups of animals and different types of plants, and then try to get a feel for, okay, how many species of each do we want to cover, then pick out the ones that are most commonly seen of each of the different groups, and sprinkle in all of the interesting, unique endemics and things that are maybe rare, endangered, but unique to the area, so that people will have a little more appreciation of some of them too. They may not ever see a Barton spring salamander, but you certainly hear about them, and you know that they're kind of endangered and at risk. But we wanted to include things like that too in the book. We did find that a lot of it we used on Naturalist a little bit to try to figure out, okay, out of the grasshoppers, what are the 10 most common grasshoppers that people may see in Central Texas? And so we kind of narrowed it down that way. And then we would use our own judgment too of what we see when we're out taking pictures. We've been taking pictures of nature in Central Texas probably for almost 20 years. And so we've accumulated a fair amount of photos, although I find that every year that goes by, the older photos I like less and less. So most of the ones in the book are new, but we knew where to find these things and had some recent pictures of it. So it was a great COVID project. Like we said, we spent a lot of time on it. I don't know if you want to talk about the process. Yeah, because that's a little surprising at times.
All of our books have been published with Texas A&M University Press, and that being an academic press means you have to go through a certain process.
Oh, okay.
You have to submit a proposal, a sample of the writing. They have to think, okay, that's pretty good. Here's the contract. You negotiate the terms. You have a date as to when you want to submit all of the material. And we actually lay it out ourselves and submit it that way along with the files and the photographs because we want it to be easier and we have a very distinct style that we want the book to look like.
Oh, they don't design it for you.
They did the first two books they did,
Right.
the Nature Watch Austin and Big Band they did, but the other ones, we gave them a complete PDF of a laid out book with all the photos placed and everything. And they massage it a little bit, but for the most part, it's our design.
But, most authors, especially in their first book, think as soon as I submit the material, oh, I can relax.
Yeah, you think you're done.
Oh my goodness.
Speak to the devil.
The first person.
That's okay, pretend like I'm not.
So,
It's her fault.
I'm really here for my.
Is that your editor?
Originally, yes.
she's retired now after being director
We
of the
love her.
press. Shannon, it's great to see you. Anyway, you submit the information, but then you have to go through, as you should, a rigorous academic process. You have to have reviewers review the book. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, and they recommend whether or not it should be published. You can respond, you should respond to the positive and the negative reviews and make improvements if necessary. You then, once you do that, there's a copy edit where they do lay it out. You've got to go through, make sure everything's where it should be. They make suggestions with grammar and commas and things. I can't even imagine how their eyes don't get crossed looking at this, all day long. But it ends up to be a great book. You then have to, there is actually a council of, I don't know how many, are there 12 now, Shannon, people on the review board that have to,
faculty.
or
It's
more.
like getting your PhD or something.
It's not that bad, we know people who have done that. And then it goes through that process and they approve, yes, we're gonna publish it. And then it takes a while, probably 6 months or so. And it took longer this time because this process happened during COVID.
Yeah.
And everything was slower and they lost the acquisitions editor that was working on it and had to backfill her. So this one took, that whole process normally takes about 1.5 years at its quickest, and this took more like 2. So it's a
We
while.
probably spent a year on it, getting the pictures and doing the writing and laying it out, I think.
So end to end is like a 3-year.
It takes a
Process.
while,
At least.
yeah.
Yeah.
It takes sometimes long enough that you kind of remember or don't remember really what you submitted. It's pretty awesome.
You want us to come and talk about that? I'm 2 months down from that.
Yeah, you kind of are thinking about the next one, usually when the last one comes out.
So I saw in the end notes that you took about 80% of the photos. So what's the most demanding aspect of taking photographs for a huge project like this one?
Well, finding everything is a big part of it. Just finding them. And some of the stuff is easy. Like we would use, if there was a plant we weren't really sure we had a good picture of or non-picture of yet, but we knew it was supposed to be in bloom, I would keep my eye on the records of it in iNaturalist and see what new records were out. And if I found something, here's one in bloom, and it's over, at a place that's publicly accessible, then we would go look for it. And sometimes you can walk right up to the thing and lo and behold, there it is, and take a good, take a decent picture of it.
Works for
Post-processing.
plants, not so many.
Yeah, it doesn't work very well for mobile animals, but for plants it was really good. But we spent a lot of time on post-processing photos to make them look their best and crop them and size them so that they were usable in a book. And but that's really the part I like the best, is probably just finding everything, getting out searching. We looked regularly to try to find things. We'd have targets we were looking for, and sometimes you find them, sometimes you don't. And that's why 20% of them or so were somebody else's pictures, because we just couldn't get them. Like Barton Creek salamander is kind of hard one to get pictures of unless you're a captive specimen, and so we had some awesome people that volunteered some great pictures for us to use to fill out some unique, hard to find things.
Can you tell our audience what iNaturalist is if they don't know what that is?
It's a website that is a ginormous worldwide citizen science project. So it's a compilation of amateur sightings of plants and animals all over the world. So if you're out walking around and you see a flower or a plant or a butterfly or something, you want to know what it is, or you would just like to record it and document it for posterity that this species was in this place at this time, you can take a picture of it and submit an observation in our naturalist, and then it'll get, people will add identifications to your observation to tell you what it is. They get a lot of help that way. So it's kind of a fun thing too, and you could find, I don't know how many records they're up to, but I don't know if it's 100 million or something, but it's a lot of records in there.
Yeah, and I think
different
it's
species.
easy to point out that it's also a mobile app that you can have on your phone.
Right.
And you
That's-
can take pictures, as you're out and about looking for things. And we used iNaturalist a little different than most people do. Most people use it to get whatever they've seen identified. But we used it kind of in a reverse way to find something. Where is it? And is it blooming? Or Is it in a state that we want to take a picture of something? And we also would monitor it, like Jim said, because they have these distribution curves. Let's see, we want to get an ironclad beetle, and they're most active in April around cottonwood trees, and you can get that kind of information.
Yeah, it's a very
from
useful
there.
site.
Yeah.
We
And
were
it's-
actually fortunate enough to meet one of the founding guys down in Lower Rio Grande Valley a few years back at a little photo safari.
Yeah.
But I would highly recommend it for anyone interested in nature to take a look at it. You can see what's in your area by just saying, okay, what records are in Travis County, and kind of watch what's being seen and where. And plus, if you want to contribute your own sightings, they appreciate the more data that they can get. So 100 years from now, they'll be able to tell how many of what species that they were seeing here, and you'll be able to monitor over time, declines of things and increases of others.
Yeah.
Interesting data.
Thank you. So what is the biggest misconception people have about nature in urban areas?
Oh, I want to take this one. I think that a lot of people think that urban areas don't have any nature or much diversity at all. And that's so untrue. I mean, you can, if you plant native plants in your yard, if you don't use pesticides, if you don't spray for mosquitoes, if you offer water, if you plant the things that they eat or use for food, or that caterpillars eat that maybe the birds need, you can attract amazing things to your yard. Our little yard is less than 1/4 of an acre, and we have all sorts of things coming to our yard because we have all native plants and we have a water supply.
Yeah,
So if you just try to restore your property to what it should be, many times when builders are building homes, we call it land scraping. They scrape the land, build the house, put non-native grass and trees and shrubs in, and if you take what the animals, the insects and the animals need out of the ecosystem, then you break the food chain. And not all animals will eat all things. So a couple of our other books have to do with host plants for butterflies and moths. And in that, we detail the plants that those butterflies and moths lay their eggs on for their caterpillars to eat. And caterpillars are really important. I mean, I know if you have a tomato garden or vegetable garden, you don't like them much, but there's things you can do there. But caterpillars are so important. There's a very common bird here, the chickadee, the Carolina chickadee. If it wants to raise a brood of 4 little nestlings in its nest, before those birds fledge or leave the nest, they'll need somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 caterpillars that the parents have to find to feed them. So if you have things that the caterpillars like to eat because they're the host plants for the insects, then you're helping that entire food web. And you can do that. The other thing I've got to point out is I read a statistic that said that in the city of Austin area, 50% of our green space is actually non-native lawns and non-native plants. And so just think about what we could do if we could transform all those spaces. Use less water, less mowing, less edging, just keep it more natural. I think we'd all benefit.
Yeah, we probably water our lawn about 4 times, our landscape about 4 times a year, and that's really about it. This past year, in our little 0.2 acre lot, just this last week, we had a zebra longwing butterfly, which is kind of a cool, beautiful little creature, and orchard oriole just the other day. So you just never know what you might see coming through. We had 2 winters ago, we had a broad-billed hummingbird stay, beautiful male stay in our yard over the winter in our feeder. And probably the 3rd record for Travis County or something. You just never know what you might see if you have the right kind of plants and habitat around your house.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I like that there's so much change that's possible in really just your yard, just in your own individual space.
But we probably had about 5 or 6 species of snakes at least too in our yard too. Not that everybody wants to have snakes. We always like looking at the next door application and how everybody's always asking what snake is this. And
It's always a venomous one.
it's always something they think it's either always a copperhead or a rattlesnake, and it's almost always a rat snake.
Which we want.
Yes.
So for the two of you, what's been the most rewarding part of writing this book, and then what's been the most challenging part?
Well, I would say for the most rewarding part, it's doing things like this, where we get to talk to people about things we love, things we appreciate, things we're passionate about, and get people to something in their head to click and say, hey, maybe I should take out part of my lawn and put some of these plants in, or maybe I should take up bird watching or apply for the Master Naturalist or Master Garden program. I think that when we see the light go on in somebody's face and we see that they've got it, they've learned something, they now appreciate something, that's a great first step, and that's very rewarding for us.
Yeah. As far as challenging things for me on this, I don't think there was much that was too challenging on this book. On the two host plant books that we did prior to this, I would say the big challenge was finding caterpillars for all the butterfly and moth species, because that's a little more difficult. And we had a lot of people that helped provide us with photographs for those things, but even finding people that had pictures of some of these things was not easy. And a lot of plant and animal associations for Lepidoptera and butterflies, they don't really know everything yet. Even today, there's thousands and thousands of species of moths, so finding out what are the plants that each of them eat is unknown in some cases still.
The other thing I would say, and this is kind of a side note but related, is some of the pictures we took of moths, we actually, you can collect cocoons from the wild from certain places, or you can buy some, or you can get some from the Austin Butterfly Forum. That's a club where people will exchange things. And what we do is we get them in the fall, and we put them in containers and put them in the crisper door of our refrigerator. So don't ever open our crisper door.
I won't find any snacks in there.
It simulates winter, and then in March, we'll actually take those out and put them in screen cages on our back porch. And they emerge, and when they emerge, we take them off. This is to get good pictures of them. And by the way, we only pick species where we have their host plants in our yard or nearby. Except we had one species, we had somebody drive out to West Texas because that's where it was from. But we then will put them in a container and in the refrigerator for 30 minutes because it slows down their metabolism and they won't move as much. And then we'll actually take photographs of them.
Oh, wow.
So that's one way we do that. And we've got about 5 minutes to work with them and position them. And then as soon as they start warming up, we have to let them go.
Yeah, then you have to keep a net handy in case they start flying around the house.
Yeah.
We have two very interested indoor cats too, so.
Yeah, to keep them at bay.
Yes.
That's amazing. I never heard that about the refrigerator. So what do you hope readers take away from this book?
I think mainly that how much interesting biodiversity there is around even an urban, semi-urban area like Austin. There's a lot of different plants and animal species here.
I also want them to learn about it so they can appreciate it. And when you then appreciate it, you learn to respect it and hopefully protect it. And that's really the progression we hope people take.
Less pesticides.
Less mosquitoes.
Please, no mosquito spray. It's not just mosquitoes that kills.
We like to call mosquito spray, an equal opportunity killer,
Oh,
because sadly it is.
yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Because I know we're all getting ads and getting those.
Yeah, they do push that quite a bit. And I don't know, I've been around long enough around here to know that when I drive across the state of Texas going over to the coast and back, generally you would have your car windshield would be covered up with bug splats, and you might have to even stop occasionally, once to clean off your windshield. I went over to Houston and back in end of May this year, and I had one little tiny bug splat on my windshield, and that was it. So, that's an indicator of how things have changed over the years, and not in a good way, because it really starts with insects. They are the food source for most small animals, and you really don't have insects, you're hurt. That's why most bird species are in decline. Insects in general are in decline. Of across the North America, and it's not because, you know, it's really because of the chemicals we put in the environment. It's the big reason for that.
You know, I will say we don't want to minimize, you know, the fact that there's things like West Nile virus, certainly. But there are things you can do that really don't take any chemicals. You know, you can make sure you don't have any standing water. If you do have water, make sure it's moving. You can use bug spray on yourself. You could use citronella candles.
Yeah.
And then you can wear light, cold clothing. And you know, whenever we go outside and do things, we have long pants and long sleeve shirts on. And there's even insect repellent clothing you can get and wear. So there are things you can do other than putting chemicals in the environment, because a lot of these chemicals that are used for these sprays will kill everything, not just mosquitoes, not just the ones you don't want.
Just as a little aside, my life background is growing up in corn and soybean country in Illinois, and the home of Roundup Ready crops, and you know, where they've really wiped out milkweeds up in that part of the world just because they plant these crops that allow the crops tolerant to the chemicals, so they can spray all the crops and kills all the weeds and just leaves the crops and nothing else really there. So that's a large part of why the monarchs have declined over the last few decades.
Speaking of that, so our Texas Great Read for Children for this year, The Mystery of the Monarchs, is a good example of the community science that you write about in your book. It talks about how it took thousands of scientists and teachers and students many, many years to help map the migration of the monarch butterfly. So what organizations do you recommend today for people interested in getting involved in a community science effort?
Well, we've mentioned a few. Becoming a Master Naturalist is really a great program. Master Gardeners is a great program.
That's through the county, or?
Yeah, they each have their own websites. That's through the county extension and a few other partners.
Yeah.
But that's mainly driven by them. There's chapters in every county, just about. Native Plant Society of Texas is an excellent place. The Wildflower Center, you can become a volunteer at the Wildflower Center. Austin Butterfly Forum is a place where it really, for all insects, that there's a group of people that meet every month, and they have a monthly speaker, and they'll do plant swaps there. They'll give away caterpillars. If you've ever had to raise caterpillars and silk moths that eat a ton, you know, you can very quickly be tired of doing that. Want to give them away.
Yeah.
So there's
That's
a lot
okay.
of organizations, and I think we mentioned them in the book too at the end, where you can volunteer. And all these organizations really love the fact that they get people who want to learn, and then their responsibility then is to give back and teach other people. And that's a wonderful gift, I think, to our society.
Right. The Master Naturalist program was set up with the state of Texas, and you have to do 8 hours of advanced training every year, and then 40 hours at least of volunteer service to maintain your qualification. But that's a great organization. We met so many great people. The instruction to become one, all the people that taught the classes were great, and just the opportunity to do volunteer work in some special places was really pretty cool.
Yeah, and I'll have to mention, our favorite place to do volunteer work is the Balcones Canyonlands Preserve in the city of Austin, and also Travis County. Plus, so you can become an experienced volunteer with them, and you get to see a lot of the different tracts of land that you can't normally get on that don't have public access. We have done for 25 years, we've done golden cheek warbler surveys for them, and that's the endangered bird here. And every spring we go out, and we have 2 territories that are 100 acres each. And we have to go out, they band the birds, and they band them with certain color combinations, 2 bands on the left, 2 bands on the right normally. And we have to go out and not only find the birds, which we do by their calls, but then see them and see if they're banded or not. And if they are banded, what's the combination? Because that information will give biologists information on their lifespan, their productivity rate, etc. They've only been banning them since 2009, but we've been doing reciting of the birds that even weren't banded for a long time. And that data is really useful in terms of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and whether or not populations are improving or declining, how productive they are, how many birds actually come back. And interestingly enough, they come back to almost the exact
That's
same
kind of
spot
astonishing.
every year.
They go all the way down to Central Mexico, or Central America and Southern Mexico, fly all the way back up here, and they come back to almost the same tree to nest in. I mean, it's, how they do that is a miracle.
But that's the kind of thing you can do if you sign up to be a volunteer for either the City of Austin or for Travis County. And they'll put you through training. Another thing we're doing, we just started, is fuel moisture monitoring. So we go out every month and we collect samples off of the ash juniper tree, which everybody calls cedars. And we collect samples from 4 different sites around the county. And then those are then measured for, they're put in an oven, and the moisture is measured before they're put in the oven and then measured after they're dry, and they can get the fuel moisture content. That information goes to the Wirelands Fire Divisions. And they look at that to determine whether or not we need to have a burn ban, or if it's safe to do a prescribed burn, if we have to put out red flag warnings, those kinds of things. So it really does benefit society and our community if you volunteer. And the benefit is it's 2 ways. So you get to learn, you get to go out on tracts of land that you can't normally go out on, and it benefits everyone.
Yeah, we have seen some pretty cool things just doing the bird surveys, being able to get out into the properties and you see some interesting things out there, like coral snakes and other birds, other migrating birds and animals. It's a great opportunity. Anytime you can get out there is a good thing.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. So one of our readers beforehand had submitted this question: how has climate change affected butterfly populations?
Well, we talked about monarchs earlier. Let's use them as an example. Monarchs are very temperature dependent. So when it starts getting cooler up north is when they start heading back down south and heading to Mexico. If it gets too warm in the mountains of Mexico, they might stop short and stop somewhere where they're not as protected in those canyons and valleys in Mexico. Now, climate change can also cause really erratic freezing events. Let's say in the fall, we get a freezing event here, and they decide, well, that's too far, I'm not going to go any further. So they won't actually go to their typical or normal protected wintering grounds. You can also talk a little bit about milkweed and how temperatures might affect milkweed, their host plant.
I was just going to add to that, though, there's also in Mexico then, if they're getting cold, wet rain down there and they're overwintering grounds instead, that is they're fragile little beings and they don't do well with cold, wet rain, and that could kill a lot of them off. So if the climate, bad, right weather conditions at the wrong time could really be devastating to them. And the other thing we're finding is that the opportunity for milkweeds to persist, they may become what was called move more polar. Their range of milkweed species may end up migrating north and leave a gap between their overwintering range and where they normally would be.
And they wouldn't have anything to eat on them.
Yeah, they wouldn't have anything to eat on. There could be a big enough gap that they would, not be able to sustain their migration because they couldn't get across it.
Scientists have found that how animals and insects adapt in climate change, when it gets warmer, they either move up in elevation if they can, or they move further up in latitude or further north. The problem with that is cycles get out of balance. For example, let's look at, right now we're getting the start of hummingbird migration, and we normally have black-chin hummingbirds here and some ruby throats. Well, the ruby throats normally go much further north, and they're coming back now. We've got a few at our feeders now. But a lot of these hummingbirds, when they're migrating, they need nectar flowers along the way. And if flowers are blooming earlier because it's warmer, and and they're moving north at their normal time, they'll miss that bloom and they won't have the food that they need in order to make their migrations. So cycles are becoming disrupted that way.
Yeah, and in the spring, caterpillars, in the spring, like the golden cheek warbler comes back in early March, and usually they come back at a time when there is a lot of caterpillars in the oak trees and things. But if the timing of gets out of whack and that the caterpillars come earlier because the tree's leafing out a little sooner or something, then they can get in a mismatch and not have their main food supply there when they come to raise their kids. So it's an opportunity to really screw things up.
Yeah. It's very eye-opening. So what's next for you as authors? You had mentioned you're already kind of mentally on the next project, so what's your next book?
We always have a lot of ideas.
We've had a few that we're sort of half-baked working on.
One I would say we're the furthest along on is doing a Naturalist Austin type book for Big Bend.
Oh, wow.
Because Big Bend, our second book was on Big Bend, and we've been to the national park more than 100 times, and we absolutely love it there. So we actually have gone through the exercise of going through and determining what species it would be, and Jim's gone through all our photographs to see which photographs we have. I'm the one that's laggard on the writing. I think I've only finished the trees, and we haven't told A&M about this yet.
Yeah, we haven't committed ourselves to anything on this because this was easy because it was right here.
Right.
This is a 7-8 hour drive to get to where all the little creatures are, so it's a little bit more of a undertaking. We have probably 60% of the pictures just in previous trips, but the other ones that we can get that require a lot of visits at the right time of year. And this is where, we could look at the plants in our naturalists and say, this is blooming now. But if it's blooming now and it's in the Chisos Mountains in Big Bend and it's 8 hours to get there, why, it's not just so easy as just drop what you're doing and go. It's a little tougher. But we were thinking about that. We also thought about doing other host plant, butterfly host plant association books. We made a list for one for New Mexico, but we haven't really, other than making a list of plants and butterflies, we haven't really gone too far on that either. But those are things we think about.
I think the Big Bend one sounds amazing.
Yeah, that's the more likely one.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we open it up for a Q&A?
I don't think so, but if you're interested in hearing from us, we do have a blog we call Nature Watch. You can subscribe to it. And we try to put things out every month, but right now we're in a little bit of a bind because Jim's computer died.
Yeah, it's been nursing it along for a while.
Yeah.
It's only 9 years old. I know it's but I got 150,000 photographs on the external hard files and a lot of stuff. But new machines in order, but it's going to take a little bit. But we do put a blog out once a month, usually on some seasonally relevant topic in Central Texas.
And what's that? Ready.
If you Google Nature Watch Blogspot, BLOGSPOT.
Yeah, it should come up.
So now we're at the Q&A portion of our event. Please raise your hand if you have a question and we'll bring you the mic.
Victor, are you ready for your question?
Oh, yeah. So, I'm not a photographer for obvious reasons. But I'm trying to get a visual of this. So, you alluded to this, I'm assuming that when you take pictures of these animals and plants, that ideally you want them to be still, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, and that's easier for the plants usually than the animals, unless it's really windy and the wildflowers can be tough, it's too breezy, but But that is part of the joy of getting these photographs, is trying to find something that'll cooperate well enough.
But I will tell you, Victor, one secret is, we say this all the time, you take 1,000 shots, one of them's bound to be good.
Yeah, exactly.
So Jim just puts his shutter speed on rapid and off we go.
Yeah, I have a lot to cull through, but eventually there's one in there at least that's okay.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi. Kind of two-part. What's a hike like for you two? And then, because I was thinking about when you were talking about Big Bend, when you go into Big Bend, are there things, like how do you approach what you're trying to look for? And I'm just curious, like how to make a hike better and how to be more observant.
Well, and this is something it evolves over time for you, and you end up having sort of a little radar for different things that you're looking for. And I find different naturalist people are more tuned in to finding different things probably than we are. We started out with birds, mainly with birds, and we were always looking for movement in trees and stuff. But that kind of evolved over time, and you started looking for movement of insects on flowers and lizards on the ground, but you're just looking for movement mainly, or hearing for birds. But we always end up taking several cameras with us, and our hikes are a lot slower than they used to be when we were just going
Speak for
there
yourself.
to hike. We used to just go to hike to get out to the South Rim or something in Big Bend and see the view, and we always took great pride in getting up there to the pass in an hour and 40 minutes or something. But now we end up taking pictures along the way, a little bit more often, flowers or bugs or whatever, cooperating along the way.
I think Jim is right in terms of, you look for movement in something, or color, something that's not quite like the rest. And that just gets you in tune to looking at details, because most people, when they think of nature, they think of the Grand Canyon or the Rocky Mountains or something big. But most of nature is not that way. Most of it is small. And I think that ours has been enhanced by starting with birds, looking at movement, moving out to plants, then to insects. And we've been influenced by people we know that have become friends. A lot of them are people who taught at the Master Naturalist class.
Right.
And we met them, or through other friends that were photographers or nature enthusiasts. And they open your eyes. We have friends who don't live here anymore, Dr. John Abbott and his wife Kendra, and his specialty is dragonflies. Boy, he got us really interested in dragonflies. We took a trip to East Texas with him, and it was
That's
just
why
great.
the dragonflies are probably overrepresented
So
for
I
that very
think
reason.
it's like one door leads to another, and once you start paying attention to the littler things, I think you really will find that more things will grab your attention.
Thank you.
Did we answer both parts? Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Every hike's an
Anybody else?
adventure, though. You're always going to find something interesting.
Oh, one more back here.
Have you ever had trouble accessing any plants or animals, not necessarily because of the time of year, but because of the location? Or were most things that you've taken pictures of on more public spaces?
Being in Texas, that is a very valid question. With 97% of the state privately owned. But it's, I'm trying to think, all of our pictures are publicly accessible. I think if there's anything that wouldn't have been, but other than maybe our yard. But,
I can think of two interesting examples.
well, Barton's Brick Salamander, maybe.
Yeah, but we didn't take that picture.
That's
but,
true.
In our first book, I think it was our first book, we have a picture of a bobcat. And that's a picture of Conan the bobcat, specifically. When we were writing our first book, we contacted the Austin Nature and Science Center down near Zilker Park. And we asked them, can we take pictures of some of your more common animals? Because how often do you have a phone with you when you see a skunk in the middle of the night, for example, or a
Or
camera?
can you get a good picture of it, because generally they're running away from you.
Right. So they were very gracious and let us in some of the cages, and I got let in 2 cages that I will always remember. One was the gray fox cage, and she told me to just, the keeper told me to just go in, sit down with my camera, and just wait. And I waited, and a few minutes later, 3 gray foxes were climbing on me like I was a tree. And they're very cat-like. So we got good pictures of gray foxes. Conan, the bobcat, was kind of a sad story. He was a pet. A man had him as a pet and declawed him. And he grew to full size, and I think it was his fiancée that said, the cat or me. So they donated the cat to the zoo, which I think was a good thing to do. But the keeper let me in the cage, she came in with me, and he was up on a shelf, kind of behind a log, and he was growling, this low guttural growl, and I thought, oh, she goes, don't worry, he's declawed. I said, I know, but he's 40 pounds of muscle. But he
Still
let
has
us,
his teeth.
he still has his teeth, but he let us take a picture. So some things that you, like other bobcats we've seen in the wild have just been a glimpse.
And running away from us,
Yes.
generally.
So some things, if you let people know what you're doing, they're very gracious to kind of help you find what you need, or find someone who can help you with what you need.
Yeah, that was one of the fun things about doing these books,
Yeah.
is the doors that would open for you.
Next question?
Okay.
Love your,
Sorry,
love
can
your,
you use our microphone? We're recording, I think.
love your moth and butterfly book. You use that a lot. Too good. In here, in the book, you have the great collection of the species, but you also have the invasives. But somehow, what I saw, maybe it's a printing cost of not putting like red warning, something to say, this isn't a good plant. This is the bad plant.
We had invasive, or what was the word we used, exotic. We had it in bright red when we submitted it to the press, and they changed it to just regular color.
But yeah, we debated long and hard about whether to even include them at all. But they're a fact of life here, and in fact, in some cases, they're the most dominant plants in the landscape. So we really felt we needed to address them, much as we hate them.
You know, the first step in people understanding an invasive plant is just to know what it is, right? And to be able to say, okay, I know what this is, and I know this isn't native, and what can I use to replace it? But you make a good point.
Anyone else? We have time for a couple more.
Is your book available here, or where is it for sale?
Where is the book for sale?
You can buy the book on Amazon. You can buy it through Texas A&M University Press. In fact, I think we have a 20% discount on it right now.
Yeah, there's a discount code they provide
right.
for this. And
Local
it's probably
bookstores.
at Barnes and Noble. Most online booksellers
Book People.
have it. Book People should have it, yes. It's everywhere.
Lucky you.
Everywhere is lucky.
I have one more question. But if you guys have a question, please bring it up. So in addition to your own books, what other books do you recommend for people interested in learning more about Texas native species?
Well, I think a lot of people ask about plants. And I will say that, our books aren't gardening books, because they don't tell you how to grow it, they don't tell you what soil it needs, etc. Even though a lot of our books do talk about plants. But some books I can recommend, one is by Sally and Andy Wasowski called Texas Native Plants. That's a great book. It has garden layouts in it for different habitats, all different kinds of plants. And I would say the other one, if you like to propagate plants, is How to Grow Texas Native Plants by Jill Noakes, N-O-K-E-S. Those are great books.
And classics. Classics.
What was the first one again?
Texas Native Plants by Andy and Sally Wasowski. Let's see, let me spell it. W-A-S,
There's a J in there.
no, O-W-S-K-I. Just like it sounds, with South.
Yeah, those are great books. And we have to always put in a plug, if you're into insects, there's most of the animals in Texas are insects. The Abbott's book, John and Kendra Abbott, they have a book, Insects in Texas, I think. It's the Texas Insects, I can't remember which the exact title is, but you can Google that. And it's an excellent book for most types of insects that you'll find around here.
Do you have a favorite spot to go to find insects in Austin?
Easy places to go to. We like we love the Wildflower Center, actually, because it's got there's always something in bloom. There's a great diversity of plants there, and we took a lot of pictures there, both plants and insects, and some birds even, I think. The Muller Greenbelt area, the butterfly garden, and the ponds there, the trails around the pond, those are a good place.
Hornsby Bend, if you like to go to wastewater treatment plants.
Yeah, if your olfactory system can take it on the right day. But I'm trying to think, there was
Do you know
another one.
Yeah, we've been Brightleaf's another
Brightleaf
beautiful
is
place.
cool. I was just thinking of
If you go on the City of Austin website, you can eventually get to a list of parks and preserves. And I think we actually put them in our first book, Nature Watch
Yeah.
Austin.
Zilker Gardens, Butterfly Gardens. That's not a bad place too.
Where is that? Is it the Nature Center?
It's near the Nature Center. It's in that. If you let me see.
Do you know where Zilker Gardens is?
Zilker Garden. There's the little drive-in and parking lot.
Botanical garden.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
The butterfly garden is
It's just
within.
sort of down slope
Oh,
from
okay.
that to the left-hand side as you go down. That's a nice place. But
It's the best.
I'd say that our favorite is probably the Wildflower Center, just because there's always something there.
And there's so much.
Yeah. I just wish they were further closer to our house, but that's just selfish.
So thank you everyone for attending our session today, and thank you to our wonderful, wonderful naturalists and authors. So save the date, we'll have another author session with awesome journalist and history expert Michael Barnes on September 9, and another on October 7, also all in the same space with author Dave Dalton Thomas, talking about his book about Willie Nelson's 4th of July picnic concerts. So follow us on @TSLife on social media, and the authors are available to sign books if you want to line up and have your book signed. Otherwise, thank you everyone for attending, and on your way out, just please leave your badge in the little basket there, but we super appreciate having everyone here.